Aloha mai kākou. My name is Kiʻi Kahoʻohanohano, and we are Mālama nā pua o Haumea. We are a hui of wāhine that are remembering who we are as wāhine in all different ways. Reclaiming and remembering our practices as wāhine in ways to Mālama ourselves, Mālama our ʻohana, Mālama our lāhui. We all reside throughout Maui Nui and serve actually island-wide and even statewide in ways of supporting our families in their healing, their wellness, and their reclamation of practice, cultural practice and identity. We are focused on lomilomi, lāʻau, lapaʻau, hoʻoponopono, and we are bringing all of these practices into the rite of passage of traditional birthing practices and protecting those practices for our future generations. Sorry, I don't know if that was good.
I'm gonna have you do the introductions right now.
Just my name?
Yeah.
Okay.
Your name and where you're from.
Okay. Aloha, my name is Tatum Herrick, and I come from Lahaina.
Lahaina aloha mai kākou, o wau o Makalani, noho au I kahului, no haiku mai au. Noho au I kahului, kia manapa.
Aloha mai. O Violet na pule I lima, ka pohaya li o kamamalu, moana liha ua ko'olani a Arona, ko'uinoa. I live in Waihuri Hawaiian Homes, Makamokupuia o Maui.
Aloha, I am Christina Mau and I'm from Lahaina and I currently reside in Waiahu.
So you already shared what your cultural practice is,
Yeah.
and the importance of it. But can you explain how you came to learn it? And then also, after having learned it and been doing it for so long, how did you come to start to teach?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I was blessed to just be in the right place at the right time. Honestly, my first hoʻomaus ever were as Opio, a youth who was a part of Nā Kupuna o Maui, a group of our kupuna that was really fighting for our aina, our waters, and the protections of our practices. And they were dedicated so much to our future generations, remembering and reclaiming the various practices that are ours. So that was my initial introduction, and through really taking care of my kupuna, I was often in the right place at the right time to learn about various lāʻau because I was taking care of them. So they would say, okay, we need this, let's go get it, those kinds of things. And so it's very natural in that respect. I started learning lomi from a young age as well, and then was blessed with other kumu throughout my life, now all whom have passed. Being a lāʻau, lapaʻau, and a lomilomi practitioner led me into aspects of hoʻoponopono and how important that is, a thread intertwining into all of it, all the work that we do really. And then because I was helping folks in these ways, for instance, I then was invited to births because a lot of the folks that I worked with were hapai families. And so, it became natural that after creating this connections and supporting them physically and spiritually throughout their process, they wanted to have me by their side in these most intimate moments. And so I started attending births, first in the hospital, and then I conceived my own first child, who is now 22 years old. For perspective, and he was probably my greatest teacher. I now have 5 keikie, and they are also my greatest teachers of Hānau. In Hawaiian thought, actually, we are the practitioner of Hānau. It's not about a pali keikie or a ko'okua or anybody else who is there to support us. Our ʻohana is there to support us. We have very specific roles traditionally, and our goal is to bring those roles back. But when it comes down to it, it's about us as wāhine and our kane, knowing their kuleana in the process. And so all of those things brought me into then home birth. and reclaiming these birthing practices on our Aino kupuna, in the places where our kupuna have been born for generations, and bringing birth home. So that's a big part of why we do what we do, and in a nutshell. And with the passing of so many of our sources of ike, our kupuna, and with also witnessing the growth of my own keikie, who are coming into, before we know it, their own child-rearing times. Looking at my titas and my nieces, my opio here, knowing that I've helped their families with multiple births, and I look forward to helping them. That's, I guess, essentially what was the catalyst to start sharing and teaching. And I think even more so just knowing how rare it is for this ike, this wisdom, to be practiced, and for the lack of ike, due to oppression and assimilation and colonization of our people and of all of our practices. Essentially, this is one that definitely got pushed underground and then almost out of existence. We still deal with that today. We've been fighting for over a decade for our traditional practices to be covered and to be clearly protected, to the point where we even have currently just one in the summertime. This past summer, our injunction to protect our cultural practices around birth and our ability to choose whom and where, with whom we Hānau. And we actually go to trial in July of January, of 2026, to secure those protections. Yeah.
Yeah, so with a lot of, like with the other practitioners, there was this level of erasure that happens with colonization, right? But thankfully with the Renaissance, we're able to come back, and a lot of people are able to revitalize these traditions. But actually, for you guys, every single year you guys are battling at the legislate.
Yes.
It's just so hard.
It's so hard, and this is the last year. So we actually have one more hearing where we're not even able to testify in person. It's all written testimony that's actually due by tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And it's the last hearing before we have to live with whatever law comes out. And that is why we have the lawsuit. The lawsuit, like I said, we did win our injunction this past summer for cultural practice to be protected. They acknowledge that the law is unconstitutional. And so we do have that to fall back on to hopefully implement whatever protections are still needed if we are not happy with the law. We put in our own really beautiful law that was backed by OHA and many other amazing endorsements. And they killed that bill without a vote. And so all we have currently is 1194, HB 1194 to work with, and it's not the best bill. So we just, like you said, we continue to advocate and try to create the change that our babies will have to live with.
So I'm going to ask a question for you real quick.
Okay.
And I'm going to go and just spread it around a little bit.
Yeah.
But why is it important that you practice keikie and all of the practices that you do? Why is it important to you, but also to the greater lāʻau?
So it's important to me because when we're talking about ea and sovereignty, it really begins within ourselves. And so if we can have that ea for our keikie during as soon as conception and on into when we Hānau, then that is an important part of that ea and moving forward for our lahui is being able to decide where we want to Hānau and who we want there during that time of ceremony, because that's really what it is. It's our highest time of kapu during pregnancy and throughout the birth and even afterwards. So the way that we are able to bring in our future generations is a really important part of instilling that ea and knowing that moving forward as a lahui. So it's definitely important how we bring our babies into the world.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go to you here. Can you share a memory or experience that you had while practicing this that made you like really passionate solidified your want to continue it.
Even if it's a hard one.
Perpetuate it.
I really couldn't say there's one instance that like clicked for me that this is what I wanted to do and to continue, but it was kind of a line of events that kept happening and showing me why I needed to continue doing so. And I've seen, in the little time that I've worked, I've seen some crazy things that hurt really bad, and it's just shown me how important it is to keep moving forward and making a change. And yeah, I think.
Can I add on to your question that you asked me? Yeah. So, and also to add on to your question for myself, as why is it's important to me as well. It's important for my keiki to be able to also have their choices be honored as to who they want around, where they want to have their babies, because if we don't ku'e for one of these most important ceremonies and traditions of ours, I mean, it's all connected. Vai, Aina, Hānau, all of our
food
cultural
sovereignty,
practices.
everything.
This is one of the oldest, Hānau. So if we are able to reclaim that and not allow outside sources, the government, colonization, to take that from us, it's really a pivotal moment to be able to reclaim that and assert ourselves in that tradition in itself. And it's also to honor those who came before us, who didn't have the resources that we have now to be able to rise up and to ku'e and to be able to kako'o our desire to protect these things. So this is for our past, this is for our present and our future, that we continue these practices, that we gotta go to legislation. I mean, we really would prefer not to have to do those things. We would prefer to be able to remain in our community, do our work, and do the work that's really important. But for now, we are having to show up politically, as well as balance being able to serve our lahui in the way that we can and should.
Ask you the next question. How do you see this evolving as future generations, kind of take up the mantle, and you guys continue in your practice, and then maybe even later on pass it down to future generations? But how do you hope, and how do you see it evolving as time goes on?
Yeah, I hope that this will evolve into more. Hānau is the start of everything, and when we take that back, we take back the rest of our practices, and we pass that on to the next generation so that they're able to practice and teach their kids, and yeah, it's just going to evolve into a better community for us all, just helping each other, being there with each other, and love. Yeah.
Can I add to that? I just wanted to add on top of that, because I think that it's very few know that actually Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders have some of the highest disparities in maternal health. We actually live in a maternal health care desert, which means we don't have access to the care, even in a Western mindset and strategy, perspective. We don't have access to that. We have people from Maui County, which we know includes 3 islands, flying to Oahu for VBACs, vaginal births after cesarean, even just for prenatal care. My neighbor, our cousins next door, Ka'akulua, on their 6th baby, and they don't have their kupuna, they've all passed. So it's just the mom and the dad and like all the other aunties and friends and family that comes through to Kokua. They had to fly to Oahu for every single prenatal visit. People don't have access to the care. So to cut off even more so folks like us who serve those rural communities, the low income folks, and we do it for love. Like, we don't have websites. You know, this is the first podcast I've ever done. I'm so like not ma'a to this kind of stuff, but it's important because hopefully this is a way we can reach the people to wake them up. But sovereignty starts at birth. You know, everybody's so concerned with sovereignty, but how are we to be sovereign if we don't know how to take care of ourselves? You know, if we don't know how to sustain ourselves in these ways. So, you know, every time you go to the hospital, and God bless the hospital, I'm not knocking the hospital, because for a time and place where we need it, we're very grateful for that, right? But for low risk birth is not a sickness or an illness. It is a heightened state of wellness. And when we're able to then enhance that wellness through our traditional foods, aipono, through, you know, recognizing how important our nutrition is the foundation of who we are. And that's why Maka says it's all connected. Yeah, we are a reflection of our aina. If our aina is sick, we will be sick, right? And so it's really important that we recognize that. And we recognize that so often in our pregnancies and otherwise, we can actually heal ourselves. But we can't drive through McDonald's every morning. You know, we cannot get this instant gratification, processed, crazy foods and expect to be well. And especially when you're hapai, you know, you're not just eating for two and you can eat whatever you like. No, this is, like she said, a high kapu time. Like, we don't eat certain foods and then we intentionally eat others because that supports life. And so it's really important to recognize, you know, all of these elements and how we create that wellness, and that we don't actually need to depend on anyone besides our traditional methods to attain that heightened state of wellness that pregnancy is, and to bring in a low risk birth at home. Our statistics are actually way better than hospitals. You know, and currently with Hawaii being 50th of the 50 states in prenatal care, it's creating the most ridiculous amount of unneeded and unnecessary disparities within our communities. So we fill those gaps, yeah? And when we spend time with folks, we spend hours and hours, not a 10, 15 minute in and out, I don't even know your name kind of visit. You know, it's intimate. So the connections and the way that we help build the family unit itself changes outcomes all by itself. And anyways, I just wanted to say that.
Shift camera angle to you now for this. But, Haumea, how about VBAC?
VBAC, vaginal birth after cesarean. After you have a cesarean,
oh, so on the next birth kind of.
the next baby comes, you can, yeah, they don't offer that
We don't
here.
allow that here on Maui, so you gotta fly to Oahu.
But
you can.
Have a C-section,
You can.
All your kids have to be C-section after
But
that.
they don't.
You can.
Yeah, you also don't have to have a C-section for a breech or for twins, but
I
that's,
tell my mom that she's been blaming me my whole life.
But
I
that's
know.
intentional.
That's
yeah?
intentional.
For
Yeah.
that misinformation, right, is intentional.
I'm
Yeah.
so sorry, I'm gonna swap batteries on this camera real quick.
It's okay.
No worries. I can breathe.
If you want to think on it, the question is going to be, why is it important for us, or for you guys as cultural practitioners, to protect women, mothers, and keikie?
Oh. That's a good one. Why is it important? Okay, he has to ask me one more time so I can refresh.
So nice and cool down here.
I think I didn't say what I was supposed to say after you, but I said something else. I don't know.
We'll circle back. I knew where you were leading to.
You said whatever spirit led to.
That's all I can say. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I could have said that.
Well, when you learn the history and you understand the years and centuries of oppression.
All right. So yeah. It's a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Why is it important for you folks as cultural practitioners in the work that you do to advocate for it? So much so that you turn into free lobbyists. You got to fly to Oahu and you testify on bills. Why is it so important for you guys to protect mothers and to protect babies?
That's a deep question. That's a great question. Well, if we're not going to do it, who's going to do it for us? You know, we support our mothers, and if you actually go through the history of the oppression that we've been through, we have advocated our voice to our government, the people above us, but they're not listening to us. So if we are the ones that need to bring the community for unity, for us to actually use our voices, we have to do it from the ground. We start here. We go into communities and then we figure out what the problem is, you know, and then we can bring it to the state building and we bring it to the people who actually can make those choices, and we try to let them know this is what the community is saying. We are out here, we're doing the groundwork, we are going to mothers' houses, families' houses, people who've lost everything, who don't know. So who is going to protect us when we can't do that? So this is why I'm here for my children, for us, for the mothers to be, for our fathers to be, so you guys aren't alone. Because I know for our father, you don't Hānau, but you guys are so important to us. So who's holding you, you know? As you have to hold the women. We can hold you guys. We hold you.
That's one of the most important parts, I think, about what we do is you know, returning to the roles that we hold. And for our kane, you know, currently they're so disconnected from the birth process so often. And so one of the principal things that we do is actually like help them remember their role. Yeah, I think one of the first questions we ask when we meet with families is, do you know what is your biggest kuleana as wāhine? Do you know what is your biggest kuleana as kane? Yeah, and we go from there. Because we're there to support the kane equally as much as the wāhine. And adding to what you said, like that was exactly my answer in my mind, is like, if we don't do it, who will? You know, and going back to what Maka was saying too earlier, is that, you know, in the age of our kupuna, my grandmother and my great-grandmother alone, which is pretty recent history, they didn't have the luxury to have the conversations or to speak freely like we do on podcast. I'm like, what is it? On a podcast, or even in circles, you know. So when we share about lāʻau, and we share about our various practices, we always remind people that, you know, and they always kind of are shame that they don't know about their family history, whether they have a lāʻau lapaʻau practitioner or a pali keikie in their history necessarily, or they might not know about the different practices themselves. Well, that was very much by design. Yeah, and so recognizing how blessed we are to be able to speak freely about these things and share them and perpetuate in itself is a blessing. And so that is why we need to do the things, because we're hanging on by a thread, honestly. And even relying on other cultures, you know, just as a navigation, we had to go back and bridge together and put pieces back together. You know, and so it's not something to be ashamed of. If you do know, you're blessed. And if you don't know, don't be hard on yourself, because our language, our practices, our lands, our waters were all taken from us very intentionally. And so, you know, like I said, that's why we advocate for all of it. Yeah, we don't stop with Hānau. Hānau is something that most people don't actually understand yet. They think it's a hippie thing to give birth at home, but guess what? Maybe the hippies like knew something that we didn't know for a while or something, but
well, they had the privilege of practicing.
That's what I was gonna say.
Our kupuna were forced to go underground because they would be persecuted. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think, as Kiʻi was saying, it is by design keeping our lahui not informed of their choices.
Yeah.
So even if it's important for us to even bring a spotlight and bringing the information and the education of the choices that are available, then that in itself is empowering. Because like you shared, your mom didn't realize that being able to Hānau after a C-section was an option.
Yeah.
And by design, it's made for you to believe that. And there is options. And as a matter of fact, it's that keeping of that information to empower our lahui in result is the statistics that we're seeing.
Exactly.
Is the poor outcomes for Native Hawaiians in birth situations, because they don't realize that there are other options. You know, you can be empowered, and to be at a birth where there's grandma, there's auntie, there's mom, all in the room, to witness this generation choosing to bring in their babies in this way at home, you know, it's very healing of the trauma that colonization has created around birth, because you really see the kupuna that are in the room remember, oh my gosh, I remember when we did this, I remember when my grandma did this, I didn't realize that we could still do this. Mahalo for, bringing this practice back to our family.
Yeah.
So it's very healing of that generational trauma that our kupuna have had to endure.
Yeah, so you talk about it being by design and intentional, right? And it very much is so, because when you consider cesarean birth versus a natural birth, the amount of money, the possibility of making, and things like that.
It's a big business.
More than being just a conspiracy theory, even like my mom, she complained about birth my whole life, saying it's the worst, and like 36 hours of labor, my whole life just complaining about it. But we see now in our generation, like my wife had 2 home births. And she loved being pregnant, she loved giving birth, she loved the whole process of it. And she tells my mom stuff like, I'm pissed off, mad, like it's not supposed to be
I think that is that generation of our parents who had the strongest having to assimilate the most.
Yeah.
And
that's where the highest disparities came and continue to come.
And they still are happening, because we look up to our mapuas and our kupunas, and they still have fear, and they're instilling fear in us, and they don't mean to. That's all they know. So for us to go back and actually, sit with them and be like, Grandma, I had a beautiful birth. To have both my mom and my 2 grandmas for my baby in the room, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, I didn't know this. This is how it is. This is how you can. This is what birth should look like. This is what birth should look like.
Yeah, and feel like.
And breathe, and actually just it's just this whole force field, this energy around us when you're in that room.
It's healing.
It's healing.
Yeah,
and
for
everyone in the room, it's rippling.
Yeah.
It ripples through not just us, but everyone behind us, and it just takes you back. It's oh wow.
Yeah, I can't tell you all the stories of kupuna that, a lot of times it's after the fact. Sometimes it's in the prenatal care, they're present for the prenatal portions of our care as well. And so they're asking planning questions, but a lot of times it's afterwards where they say, oh, well, Tita, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Like, oh, well, I don't circumcise the baby, for instance, And this anake has 6 boys. And she was told when she was giving birth, and she's in her 90s, she's about 90 now, for perspective, but she was able to be present for her great grandbabies being born. And when she asked me, why don't you circumcise? I said, well, first of all, that's out of my scope of practice. You can, but you got to go in for that. It's a cosmetic surgery, It's not needed, but that's your choice, right? But my point is, in her lifetime, she was told that it wasn't a choice, and that her boys would not be able to procreate, that they wouldn't be able to continue to have children if that wasn't done to them at birth. And I could go on and on about how harmful actually just that one topic is. But the point is they lied to our kupuna, and they continue to put them in that place of oppression and fear, and that has run through for these past generations. So that is one of the reasons that it's so important for us to do what we do, to empower and educate. So like you talk about your wāhine, the difference there is she was empowered, she was educated, she was encouraged that she was born to do this. Yeah, that this is our first and foremost, our birthright, yeah, to do this. We're created as wāhine to do this. And you know, when you play your cards right, you eat right, you do all the things to build strong babies and build strong mamas, you're gonna have the most beautiful outcomes of labor itself. And for the postpartum, your recovery is so different. And that's one of the things that adds even to postpartum depression that is so severe nowadays and so prevalent. We're missing the circle of wāhine. We're missing this this ohana connection, where the ohana even itself has roles to hold to make sure that all the things are happening for this birthing family, so that they can just be. Yeah, they can focus on healing and focus on feeding themselves and sleeping when they can, and all the things. So all the many hands need to come together. And when they do, all those hands and hearts make all the difference for these families. So we don't see postpartum depression almost ever in our work, you know, because people are held, because they are acknowledged, they're empowered from the get-go. You know, whether they came in that way or not, that's the way they leave, you know, and none of our families, I would venture to say, would ever go back. You know, they will always continue to advocate and stand for their right to have birth at home, to make sure, you know, that we don't have to fight for the right to be protected by our own constitution, our Hawaiian constitution, which was made to make sure that we have these protections.
I would just like to acknowledge, like, you know, even when you do all the things, it's still okay for whatever birth outcome you go through.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we try to do the best we can for a home birth, and it's not everything that comes out. There's always things that there's risks to everything, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, even if we do all the things, and it could be outer things that come into our couple's space, where that might not be aligned for us, and Keokua aligns us for a different thing. And that's still where we try to hold the mothers in all spectrums.
Absolutely.
You know? So
yeah.
just to be like, it's okay if it didn't come out the way you wanted, and that's the kind of the part of birth. You can't have a fixated mind on this, but you can work as hard.
Yeah.
Just know, like, that's the outcome, and that's what.
Yeah, and you know that you did everything in the process to pour into that.
Yes.
And then the difference,
enjoy that.
and the difference is that then you still have this ohana to come back and, you know, wrap around you and lift you up no matter what.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's a really great point, Tina. Sometimes, you know, for instance, towards the end even, we see before the labor itself that someone is pre-eclamptic, yeah, which is a contraindication to stay home. But what do? We go into ceremony. We prepare them, you know, not just the wāhine. Yeah, we bring the kane in. So they go in together. They start with ceremony even at home, even if they have to go into the hospital. And then in the hospitals, they can bring their tapa. Yeah, they can wrap their baby with the tapa. They can incorporate into even a hospital experience, absolutely, as much integrity and tradition as possible. They can keep their ieve. Yeah, typically we have these traditions in our life cycles, not just birth, but also in death, where we have our tapa. And the tapa should wrap the baby, and it should wrap the ieve, and then we plant our ieve, we kanu our ieve, traditionally. And so returning that connection to aina, you know, that tree or plant that we kanu with the ieve is then the kuleana of that keikie to Mālama, and it connects them to aina from day one. And then hopefully also the idea, especially if you plant something like ulu or niu, is that by the time that baby is actually ready to ingest food and not just mommy's milk, you know, that mea kanu, that plant, is able to produce whatever it is, ulu or coconut, to sustain life. And so there's always food and nourishment, but even more so, it's the connection that keikie has to Mālama and be connected to aina. Same like, you know, the cycles of when we pass. We also create that tapa for our iwi. And so really what we fight for lack of better words, ku'e for, is rites of passage in general and life cycles. So we're talking about more specifically Hānau today, but it's all connected.
Can we talk about, no, don't put it on me. Like Haumea, like how,
of course,
Haumea and Papahanaumoku, and we are her. We are Haumea. She embodies all of us.
Yeah.
And that's kind of really where Hānau comes from.
So important.
Yeah, so important.
That's the
I didn't want
foundations.
to talk about it. If Auntie Mako or Auntie Ki wanted to talk about it, I just wanted to bring it up because it's really important.
It is. There's so much to say. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
No, it's good. It's good.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, so I have one last question because we're actually 15 minutes.
That's what I
over.
thought. Yeah,
Sorry,
that's what I
but
thought.
It's so good. But so in my experience, I never planned to do a home birth until my cousin Adri Haya.
Yeah.
She asked me to come and film her.
Aww.
And so I was like,
I helped her.
pressured and thrown into it there with my camera watching and all. But in the process, I discovered it's so much different from the mainstream media portraying how fear-inducing and how
absolutely
hospital births are. And then talking to the midwives and things like that. That really changed our mind, and then we went and we did 2 home births, and it was amazing. There's no fear, there's no anxiety, and for me, I'm really controlling too. So the thought of a doctor being able to kick me out of the room was like
not happening.
Like paralyzing to me.
Yeah.
I'd beat him up before I leave the room. So what message could you share to someone who doesn't have that opportunity to be there and to witness how magical and peaceful it is? How would you convince them that this is the way to go? Because a lot of times, like with our cousins, they see, they hear, it was better than a hospital birth, it was peaceful, it was good, but they still cannot
grasp it.
Yeah, and they want to. They go,
yeah,
that sounds so good.
And that's one of the reasons we're here, and that's one of the reasons also at our booth or in our area over here, we have all these pictures. Yeah, because I think like a picture can speak a million words, right? And it'll relay a message. People aren't used to seeing, like physically laying eyes on what beauty birth can be. And so to be able to share, even just through photos or videos or birth stories, is so important. I think one of the things, it's interesting that you said the word convince, because I always tell people I'm not here to convince anyone. That's actually one of the scariest things for me as a palikiki midwife, is I'm not here to convince you. You actually have to know it within you and within your bones that this is my path. I'm here to support you, to educate you, to uplift you, and to empower you and give you the tools. But I notice in over 20 years of practice, but the people that I have to spend all this time, convincing, they have poor outcomes.
It
So
has to be your i'ini.
yeah,
You have to have the i'ini of wherever it is that you feel is the safest place for you to be, whether it's at home or in the hospital. But the similar factor in either place that you end up is that that's where you need to be, and that you have been given the opportunity to be empowered and to know that you're so ready to bring your ceremony wherever that whether it's at home or in the hospital, and that empowerment comes with being exposed to the different ike that is available around birth, educating yourself around birth, because then wherever you end up, you're pa'a, and you are able to advocate for yourself, and so is your partner able to advocate for you, or your ʻohana is able to advocate for you. So it's that preparation that happens leading up to wherever you end up feeling the best.
Yeah. So I always encourage people just come sit down, talk story, ask questions. Yeah. Because they almost always come in with fear, because that was ingrained in us. Yeah. But I feel like the more we have the conversations, the more we build connections, the more we go into ceremony, the more we help prepare them, the more that all just falls off. And so I think that's really where it's at. Is yeah, of course you can.
Sorry, I was like having faith.
Yeah.
Pule, keokua, I feel like is a huge part of how you mentally prepare yourself for anything that you do.
Yeah.
How you start your day or whatnot, but especially with birth. So if you are praying every day or you're only praying when you are in your hard times, just start talking to keokua. And that, I feel like that's probably one of the hugest things, having faith over fear. And just even having
faith over fear.
conversations. Like she said, that fear will start to shed off and you can start having faith in yourself and in whatever belief you have. So, yeah. Sorry.
All right. Is there anything else you would like to share?
I'm sure I'll think of something afterwards.
When people do come up to your booth and they come and they ask questions and you guys teach them things, what do you hope that they're walking away having learned, or what do you hope that they're walking away?
I think, in spaces like this, I think just connection and knowing that there's resources to come to ask questions, for more support. We have a whole table of various lāʻau, lapaʻau, different plant medicine that pertains to Hānau. And so to be able to explain to them, like, did you know you can use this for this? And they just are kind of blasted right open because they've always looked at these plants and maybe looked at it as a weed, or they didn't know what this was. They definitely didn't know how to use it. And so just, I think that alone, creates seeds. Yeah, planting seeds. We have some really beautiful handouts today. So even when we have only the opportunity for small, short conversations and planting those seeds, they can go home with timelines of our kahuna healer persecution and where we are even up to today, which most people walking around this place, they don't know the history, they don't realize. And so, knowing a little bit more historically about who we are as wāhine and what our practices are and how important it is to remember that, whether it's that you are making tapa or weaving lauhala, or you're learning plant medicine, or you're reclaiming your birthing practices, we want you to remember all of these things and more, and so we're just trying to, I guess, instill that in these younger generations who actually have these options and the choice to practice and remember, again, in a time now where that is a freedom that is theirs and not a freedom that we have had in our even most recent generations. So, I was just talking to somebody today, this morning, who was like, so I was gathering some medicine and they were asking me, what do you use that for? And, they were like, I really wish we knew all these things when we were having kids. And so I think just having these conversations simply, and planting those seeds, creating connections, letting them know that we're available to sit down with them outside of this. That if they're hapai and they want to sit down in the circle, if they want to come in, we have choke services to assist them at home, in hospital, postpartum. We have wellness programs that they can get lomi and acupuncture and you name it, so many different resources. So today we're really just trying to make sure that the folks leave here knowing that we have an online store where they can get diapers and wipes and all the things, baby oriented. And yeah, just so much resources. We have food distributions weekly. And, we're really trying to hone in on our traditional foods as much as possible, support our local farmers and ranchers and whatnot. So I think just getting the word out there, today is a beautiful opportunity to do that. And that's what we look forward to doing as much as we can, honestly, because I think it takes a personal connection. Yeah, and when people start look you in the eye and they have that personal connection, it's different than reading the palapala, or being online. And honestly, the statistics speak for themselves, but people don't know those statistics. They just know the fear tactics that have worked so well for so many years. Anybody else? Sorry.
Mahalo.
Oh, right on.
All right. Kalamai, we long, yeah.